Well, okay. We'll just leave that for a minute and go into the second point, and then maybe give some ideas of what might be going on. Okay, this second one, it's pretty busy. Couldn't really come up with a good way to show it in a hurry. But what we've been seeing in this graded response, this exercise response, where we take you up to different levels, is that the immediate post-flight response, everybody tends to look relatively better at the higher levels. In other words, the percentage decrement at the higher levels is less than at the lower levels. And as a matter of fact, this is one of the reasons back on 9 why we went to the 180 heart rate immediately post-flight. We wanted to see whether this trend continued, and maybe at 180 that the decrement didn't even exist. It turned out that it did exist at 180. It was less, but it still did exist at 180. Now, on this flight, again, Al shows this trend to increasing or relatively better at the higher heart rates, where Dave and Jim aren't. In other words, the slope is reversed, and at the higher heart rates were relatively worse. In other words, you were very close to your pre-flight at the low rates, but not at the high rates. And so, again, this fits in that there was something different here for Dave and Jim. And starting to look at some of the supporting data we have now, the cardiac output, for instance, tends to show that the response was not the same response we saw in you. We did see, for the same levels of oxygen consumption, an increased cardiac output for Al, which is what we had seen on 14 on Rusa, who had shown that. And so your response fits into the hypothesis of possibly a decreased peripheral resistance, which lowers the blood pressure. The heart rate response is higher for each level of work or oxygen consumption. However, Jim's and Dave's cardiac output is right on the pre-flight line. So that response, for some reason, it doesn't exist. And it possibly could be that the exercise they got on the lunar surface did tend to negate this sort of bed rest type response, which we're seeing in the rest of the cruise. Now, the reason for this decrease at the max point or at the higher points, I'm not really sure what the mechanism is, and it could be, well, let me say that the fact that we, on Dave here, we're coming back, if this curve had leveled off completely, I think there would probably be good evidence or good speculation to say that because Dave was in such a high level of aerobic capacity pre-flight, that he would have to train to get that level back. But the last time that we ran, I guess before you started training, it was still coming back. So to me that looks as if it's still the same mechanism which caused the immediate response. In other words, there was still something associated with the flight which we don't understand, which is still changing his normal response to exercise. And
flight or pre-flight, which you don't understand.
Post-flight, right?
No. Maybe associated with pre-flight.
Well,
can you throw that out? Conclusive?
No.
Okay. Except we haven't seen it on anybody else.
Except,
That's right.
yeah. Except that
haven't seen pre-flight levels on anybody else.
Well, Jim's, however,
Okay.
are fairly normal levels. Okay, and he's seeing the same thing. You know, and that's the only thing I can say to that is that there's two of you, and they're both showing the same type of slope back to normal, and one of you is at a higher level of aerobic capacity than the other, but you're still showing the same curve back.
But both those levels still pretty high.
Right, right. They're both
the average,
above average.
above average from what we've seen on cruise, all three of them.
And I guess those are the two main points.
Okay, now,
Sure different looking curves.
pardon?
Sure different looking
Yeah,
curves.
they really are. Okay, and the point that you're at now in the data is that you've got a normal curve now on everybody but Dave, is that right?
Right.
Okay, that's the point you are.
Well, the only point on his curve that's still abnormal is that one.
Is the high
Is the high.
part of the curve, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Is that the, what did we run at last time?
We got up to 172, I think.
Which hadn't been evaluated.
Right, right. But your 160 point was still down, but increased from the time we done the previous.
Wick, you gonna do that? Okay.
I got to place it before you fellows. This one, just sit down or something here in the back. Okay. Well, I'll just put one of them up at a time. And these are the 4 post-flight runs of Dave compared to your pre-flight mean, which is the black line, with the variance shown by the standard deviation there. And you can see that there's no argument that Dave is returned by this 122 hours, or just categorically in the pre-flight range. For Al, we had to add a little extra.
Had to add another sheet.
You see a very distinct trend to 121 hours, but this is still statistically well out of your pre-flight variability. And that's the reason we wanted to do you one more time to show that you have returned. Now, of course, as we are a week and a day later than this one today, we will be less able to pinpoint exactly where you returned with that one. I suspect it was sometime in the middle of last week, but those are the data. And then for Jim, we did have 5 runs, and we show that he, rather than coming in a clean sweep, regressing toward the pre-flight baseline, sort of held a plateau for a space there, and not till 210 hours post-flight can we say that you are within the pre-flight range. You're still up. If you look at the trend, you're still up, but this is statistically within the range. The value here is 1 standard deviation, and it's just above 2 standard deviations that we consider a 95% confidence variability. Now, those data are just the heart rate. We've seen gross variability of your blood pressure. We've seen inconsistence in your leg volume change. As a matter of fact, Dave showed much less change in his leg volumes post-flight. Al showed much greater change, and Jim is sort of bringing the median. I wanted to bring this point out about the leg volumes, though. You know, I told you fellas that you lost upwards of a ½ inch. Dave, definitely a ½ inch. Here are your 3 measurements, and you can see this is not a sophisticated measurement, but it's straightforward and simple. And there's no way in the world you could err in that degree post-flight. Al is approximately 3/8 of an inch down, and Jim, again, about a ½ inch. This will be important later when we're talking about the blood volume changes that have been seen in your folks.
Yeah, and remember Jim's response here compared to your 2 guys' responses is in the way that this curve went down when you hear what Carter's going to tell you about blood
It's
volume.
rather interesting, too, that this leg volume a leg circumference change is very consistent and synchronous with your responses to the low body negative pressure too.
You say it's important to remember which curve? The leg
No,
circumference?
remember the way that these curves went, the trend for these
progression
curves,
toward
and the way
normal.
that you guys had a definite progression down, and Jim did not here. He tended to linger in that same way until he went down, and we think we got a pretty good explanation for that.
I have drawn the immediate post-flight blood pressure. These have traditionally been much more variable. We see in Dave a distinct widening of your pulse pressure. The systolic is up, your diastolic down, and greater variability of the pressures themselves, as if the mechanism is more in a hunting mode. In your
You
case,
showed me the curve beforehand, I found the right note.
didn't give you the program. In Al's case, you have lifted both of them, both values, systolic and diastolic, without a distinct absolute change in your pulse pressure. And in Jim's case, he essentially lowered his diastole for a greater pulse pressure, as you have got a greater pulse pressure. And John is talking about the peripheral resistance. In our measurement, you know, I always took one blood pressure clinically. That blood pressure is almost invariably higher. It's a resting supine now, bear in mind, but it's invariably higher post-flight than you fellows had pre-flight.
Variations on the order of 10 to 15 systems.
Right. I mean, that's a distinctly elevated pressure.
I can do that for you. I can do that for you.
Just by thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, I can do it physiologically without thinking about it. I have to think about it. I do
There's
that.
a lot of lability of seeking and hunting of the blood pressure is a typical thing that you see.
If you fellows would like copies of these, I can make them for you without technical.